be done, and you give the guidance and the comforting and understanding that only you can provide, Father, and that we are receptive to that and understand that your plans are not our plans and that your timing is not ours. That it's all based on you, Father. And now as we prepare to listen to this lesson, Father, I pray that our hearts are open and our minds are clear to listen to your message, and that we, again, take that to heart and use it this week as we go about our daily activities and those that we run into, Father. I pray that each of us show that you live in our hearts, Father, and that we express that to those folks that we talk to at work and wherever you would have us to go. I ask that you forgive us where we failed you, and we ask that you be with those that are not here for whatever reason, Father. For I ask all this in your Son's precious, precious name. Amen. All right.
All right, we are going to be in Genesis chapter 6 through 9 in the last of 3 weeks that we have spent on Genesis. I know we were out last week, which normally we would have done this last week, and I didn't want to skip this, so we're going to stay here, and then next week, again, we're going to kind of stay in sequence to go to the events at the city of Babel. So to kind of, I'll find some place to kind of drop and skip and get back on the calendar, but at least for this week and next week, that's what we're going to do. So we're Genesis chapters 6, 7, 8, and 9 is where we're going to be this morning. In the first week that we looked at this self-revelation of God through the life of Noah, we looked at what God saw when he looked upon the earth. In the kind of the second week we did this, we looked at what God said, and today we're going to focus on what God did. In that kind of 3-part approach to the self-revelation of God through the life of Noah. So I'm going to be a real short little preamble by contrast. For me, maybe it does for you, but for me, certainly sometimes if I'm working hard on something, contrast helps me understand things more thoroughly than parallels. And so in this case, contrast helped me, so I'll offer it for you. I've mentioned it before. Do we know who I'm talking about when I talk about Sam Harris? Do we know Sam Harris? That's probably a good thing. Sam is a part of a group that are referred to as the New Atheist. And Sam is, by education, he's I hear you cringe, but sometimes to catch a gopher, you got to think like a gopher. You got to figure out what these guys, where they're at, because we have to approach the world where the world is. And if we have no idea how the world thinks, why the world thinks it does, then it handicaps us to some degree to approach the world. So I'm with you. I cringe at the positions these guys take, but I do a lot of reading of atheists and what their ideas are and how they arrive at their conclusions, and I do it specifically for the purpose of being able to engage them from where they're at, beginning where they're at, to reveal the person of God and the Messiah of Christ. So, in any event, Sam is a part of a kind of a collection that are referred to as the New Atheists. And Sam won't refer to himself as an atheist. He's actually very, very intelligent guy, and intelligent enough to realize that since you can't prove a negative, that's a logical fallacy. To be an atheist is a really stupid claim. It reveals a kind of an ignorance within you to say you're an atheist, because one, you can't prove a negative, and two, when you're talking about God, to say that he doesn't exist means you must have the power and the knowledge that exceeds all known or all power. You must have omniscience to know that an omniscient being doesn't exist. Therefore, you've become the very person you say doesn't exist, which is also kind of stupid too. But Sam sees through all that. Tim is educated as a neuroscientist and is very capable, and then he has kind of emerged as a bit more of a philosopher and aligns himself with a lot of the non-theological precepts of the kind of the New Atheists. And I say the New Atheists because the New Atheists have kind of, following Sam's lead, kind of walked away from the idea of atheism. A theos, no theos, God. That the claim is that atheist is no God. And so Sam's position is, and you have to do gymnastics here to start swimming in the world of theology, but say there's no such thing as God. he'll say that I lack theistic belief. So when he refers to himself, he'll say, well, I'm not an atheist, you can't say that, but I lack theistic belief. Well, that's fine. You can lack theistic belief, and you can like bananas, and you can not like bananas. All you're doing is reflecting an opinion. You're not making a truth claim when you say, I lack theistic belief. All you're doing is offering your personal opinion. Okay, fine. But don't say that your personal opinion is the footprint on which all of existence finds its existence. All you got is an opinion if you say you lack theistic belief. So that's the position that Sam comes from. Now, Sam is a guy that he is. He's written several books. Open Letter to America, which is kind of one of his more popular books. And I have a copy of that, and I read that. Don't necessarily recommend it unless you just kind of, like me, dig into this stuff to find out where these people come from. But he's also on the speaking circuit, and you will always hear Sam, anytime that he speaks, and often in several of his books, make this one claim. And this one claim that he will make is, if there is a God, and this is kind of our preamble, so this is the connection point. If there is a God of the Judeo-Christian ethic, I really don't want anything to do with him. Because I'm really offended by the idea of a God that takes such an interest in how I live my life. And I'm really upset about the idea of that God being totally obsessed with what I do in my bedroom. And so that's Sam's position on specifically the God, the Judeo-Christian God, the Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as we talked about this morning. Now, he'll be antagonistic to all religions, all theologies, but the anchorage of his attack on theology is Christianity. But the idea that he posits is that the reason I don't, it's not a truth claim, it's just I don't want anything to do with, it's expressing an opinion, not a truth claim. I don't want anything to do with a God that actually cares about how I live my life. And functionally, he speaks verbally what a lot of people functionally live out. I don't want God to be so involved in my life that he actually involves himself in my life, tells me what's right, tells me what's wrong, how I should live my life, how I should not live my life, what's good, what's bad, what's sacred, what's profane. Now, I want to live my life. If there's a God, great, be a God, but don't mess with me. Sam is just voicing what a load of people, and I dare say a lot of nominal Christians really want or choose to live. And we see it, and I'm going to walk right into the beginning of, and again, this is what God did in God's self-revelation in Moses, or Noah, because we're going to pick up Moses here in a minute too, by extension, which kind of occurs to me this morning in the sermon. When men began to increase in number on the face of the earth, and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married, and then they chose. And we see the Spirit of God says that I'll not contend with man forever. The Nephilim were on the earth. And when we get to verse 5 of chapter 6, the Lord saw how great man's wickedness was on the earth. The first thing that God did in this exchange is he looked, he saw, he cared, he embraced. What's the other option that God had when every thought, every inclination of man's will was bent on evil? What's God's alternate possibility? I'm sorry?
Destroy all.
Well, that's what he did. But if God looked upon, what was the other option that God had? Look away. Who cares? Man's going to be what man's going to be. Boys will be boys. Let them be boys. I don't care. It's the apathy. It's apathy. God could take an apathetic position and say, it's a train wreck, but it is what it is. I hate that phrase, but I'm going to use it here because it's a kind of a discarding phrase. Is that God doesn't care. That's what Sam's asking for. I want a God Who doesn't care? If there is a God, I don't want the God who cares. I want the God who doesn't care. I want to be left the heck alone. Well, Sam, with all due respect, you're going to get that. Everybody who chooses to say, I don't want to be embraced by or influenced by or affected by or befriended, for that matter, by a God who wants influence over my life. Well, not great, but you're going to get what you want. Often in Christian circles we talk about, why does God send people to hell? God doesn't send people to hell. We choose that. That's what you're choosing when you say, I do not want God involved in my life. I want to be left alone. You will be left alone. You will be given over to the desires of your own heart. You will get exactly what you ask for without any real understanding of what it is that you asked for. That's what will happen. There's another side to this. So that's the contrasting side. But God did not take that dismissive or apathetic position because God loved his creation. He hated the sin of his creation. If you're looking for an origin of the idea of love the sinner and hate the sin, for lack of a better origin, I'm going to drop that one on the table. This is where God himself says, oh, I love mankind, but I hate the sin of mankind. And I care enough about it to focus this morning, do something about it. What the first thing that God did in this exchange or self-revelation? He saw. He cared enough to see. Now, I hadn't planned this, but Daniel got us there this morning. Well, I had this. Whichever 12 chapter, is it Exodus 12? Is that where we at? Or it was actually 2, wasn't it? It was Exodus 2. Yeah, there it is. So when Israel is in Egypt and enslaved in Egypt, I don't know why we have to, in the Holman Standard Bible, replace the word slavery with hard labor. I mean, it was slavery. That's what we were talking about, slavery. God heard the groaning and remembered the covenant he made with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. So he looked upon Israelite and concerned about them. Oh, when we're in trouble, it's not the same as Sam. We want an advocate. We want help. We want something that's outside our own ability to provide for us or to get us out of this jam that we're in, or resolve a conflict, or save my ever-loving, disrespectful, rebellious life. And it just so happens to be that supernatural power that you don't care about, that you want to be left alone. So when things are fine, I want to be left alone. But when I'm in trouble, the idea of a God that is actually paying attention, who cares enough to look upon me and hear my suffering, that's a pretty attractive prospect. And I would dare say that even in Sam Harris's life, when he's in trouble or when he's in pain or hurting, he's looking outside himself for someone else to make an investment into his life, someone to care about him. He's just not willing to let God be that person. So as we start into what did God do in his self-revelation of himself through the life of Noah, the very first thing God does is that he cares. Now that's kind of a hard thing to say when what's going to happen is that everything that has life's breath in it, with the exception of just a small handful of people, are going to be totally wiped off the face of the earth. And I'm going to begin again. So it's kind of hard to say that God looked upon us and he cared about us, but he was going to wipe us off the face of the earth. In the Ridley Scott film, Noah, there is an exchange in that film that is not biblical, but it is the all of the people who are not on the ark after the floods, rain begins and the floods are occurring, and they're crying out to Noah to let us on board, let us on board. And their complaint is that, what kind of God is it that you serve, Noah, that he cares about the animals, but he doesn't care about me. I, made in his likeness and image, will drown in this if you do not let us on board. Yet your God cares more about the animals than he does about me, made in his likeness and image. Now that's a really twisted, well, first, it's not biblical. In fact, it's probably fair to go ahead and bring forward that real quick. But second, he did care. He does care. His hand was out to you all the time. And we're gonna look at the withdrawing hand of God and the extended hand of God here in a minute. But Jesus takes this on in Matthew. In Matthew 24, when Jesus is talking about the end of the age, that the kind of the gospel, the way the gospel opens the door to eschatology, the way the gospel opens the door to the events that will take place as prophesied in the book of Revelation. In Matthew 24, beginning at 36, Jesus is talking about the end of the age, and he says, no one will know. This is chapter 24, starting at verse 36. No one knows about that day or the hour, not even the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so will it be for the coming of the Son of Man. For in those days before the flood, people were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. In case there's any question in our mind about what was happening while Noah was building this ark and gathering the animals and being shut in, is that people were eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage. Specifically, what Jesus is saying is they were going on about day-to-day life as they chose to live. If there is a God, just leave me alone. I want to live my life. And Jesus says that the time that is coming in our future, that's going to be the nature of the unredeemed man, is that he's not going to have any idea about what's about to happen. And he's going to be going along in day-to-day life. And then the day of the Lord comes. Have no idea. That is where we are. We are living in a world where man lives, I mean, whether they will say it verbally or not, to a great degree, as Sam Harris has been so bold as to say it. If there is a God, I don't care. I just want to be left alone. I want to live my life the way I say. And I really do not want him messing with me in my bedroom. That was the thing that he just pulled out more than anything. And I think we know what Sam is talking about when he wraps up a really large swath of human activity when he says that. So I'm not going to try to hit everything that God did in detail, because I really need to focus on kind of what God did in the beginning and then what God did in the end. And so in the beginning, the first thing that we would know about what God did, God cared. And he looked upon. He expressed a concern. He expressed a value, made a value judgment. So, verse 5, God saw. Verse 8, God selected Noah. Verse 14, God instructed Noah. God 18, God established the framework or established the fact that there would be a covenant. Verse 16, God shut Noah in the ark. Noah didn't do that himself. God closed Noah into the ark. Chapter 8, verse 1, God remembered or regarded Noah. Verse 15, God called Noah out of the ark. Verse 21, God smelled the offering of Noah of thanksgiving. Chapter 9, verse 1, God blessed Noah and his family. Verse 15, God establishes the essential value of life. And then verse 12 and 9 begins, God offers his covenant, which is where we're going to turn to now and focus. Again, we just can't take on in our time frame everything that God did. But I want you to see that there is what God saw when he looked upon us, what God said about what he saw and what he said to Noah, and then lastly what God did about it. And again, it's kind of tough for us to get too overly excited about the idea that God cares when God's going to wipe everything that has breath of life in it off the face of the earth. And that raises a question for me. Does anybody have a question about that? So for me, the question is that if the flood, why? If you're going to start over again, why do the flood at all? If it's never going to happen again, if that's the covenant, never again will I bring a flood to kill or destroy, to use the language here, but it's kill, to destroy everything that has life's breath in it. But I'll never do it again. Then why do it the first time? I've got a thought on that. I'll share it. It's not the thought that you and I talked about on Tuesday, but Jim's already got something boiling in the front of his head.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I don't know why, but just, you talk about the flood, and I thought about baptism. To me, there's a connection. He's going to baptize, die in your own way, and rise anew in spirit. So the flood would be, again, thinking about it, I may be out in the left field, but it would be just like a baptism, dying to the old way of life, all the sin and corruption and all that went on at that period of time. And now, afterward, you're reborn anew.
Before we go on, anybody else have any contributive thought to what Jim has shared? Jim, in terms of Orthodox theology, you're in really good company with that. That is very much a eisegesis of Orthodox theology. That the flood that God brought was a form of baptism through which there is a salvation. And so, in terms of Orthodox theology, that you're in really great company. That is, as some old preachers will say, that'll preach. That is a very, very well anchored perspective to take, and I don't argue that perspective either. I think that is a valid way to look at and approach the flood. So in response to the question, if I'll never do it again, why do it the first time? That doesn't necessarily answer that question, but it certainly puts in perspective what took place. That I'm gonna wash. However, as soon as Moses offers the sacrifice and God receives it, Noah, thank you, Noah builds an altar. In chapter 8, verse 20, Noah builds an altar to the Lord, and taking some of all the clean animals and the clean birds to sacrifice burnt offerings on it, the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, never again will I curse the ground because of man, comma. I know there's no punctuation in the original text. However, I think this is a legitimate place to put a comma. Even though every inclination of his heart is evil from childhood. And never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. I'm going to suggest to you that the comma is well placed there, and to the best of my read of this, it'll happen again. But I'll never destroy everything that has life's breath in it again by way of flood. I won't do this again. So that still puts in my mind, well, why do it the first time if you're never going to do it again? Joe, you've got a thought too. From creation. You know, I had that number committed to memory. Do you have that number committed to memory? From creation to flood.
1,666.
Yeah, that's it. It was in previous notes, but you corrected me by a few years. And
1,656 years.
1650. So yeah.
So the 1,600 years can't grieve God so much that he might be into it and he destroyed.
Hmm.
So that may imply that it seems like the next trigger point for God's wrath poured out on earth is going to occur during tribulation as he did to the children of Israel. And he's also going to be angry at that one. Because he said he was going to come and come and Lord of Lords and he's going to come and make war and so forth. And people are going to be slain because of the word of God that is not spoken. And the word is the sword. I think that's very interesting that here we are 1,656 years in. Now here we are, 2,000 years from the birth, maybe 40 to 100 years from that one. God
With unfulfilled prophecy waiting for us in the future. Yeah.
sympathetically but patiently watching, but also make comment. He was grieved in. How would you feel for that?
Yeah. Does anybody have a translation here that God repented that he had made man? There are some translations that will go so far as to say that God repented that he had made man. I'm sorry? Oh, the one that Joey's referring to is back in chapter 6, verses 6. Chapter 6, verse 6. The Lord was grieved that he had made man on earth, and his heart was filled with pain. When you brought that up, that's not necessarily where I thought you were going to go. I thought you were going to say, well, what is it? I'm sorry? Regretted. Yeah, or regretted, yeah. It's to say repented or regretted very specifically implies that God's not omniscient, that man's rebellion was a surprise, and now I regret that I did this. And that's inconsistent with the omniscient God. That's why I struggle with the words repented and, in this case, regretted. But the idea that God was grieved, think of yourself for a moment, even though it's kind of dangerous to do this because we reduce God by anthropomorphizing God and then reduce God spiritually by applying human emotion to God. But it's just try to draw the parallel for a second. Were you in God's shoes and you created a being and your likeness and image, but that being rebelled against you? He doesn't care about you. He says, even if you're there, I don't care. I just want to be left alone. But didn't I bring the rain on your crops so you could eat? Yeah, but I want to be left alone. But didn't I bring sunshine? And didn't I bring food? And didn't I show you how to make shelter and fire? And did I not bring you woman? Yeah, but I just want to be left. I want all the goodies of being created in your likeness and image. I just don't want anything to do with your likeness and image. I want my likeness and image. I want to live my own life. I want to be left alone. In a couple of the addresses that Sam Harris gave, he would follow that up by saying, and I think I'm doing a pretty good job of it, which I find really funny. Really, that's, gosh, this is some pretty twisted stuff. So when you think that the way you think is a really good job with how you're living your life, that's some really twisted stuff. But maybe to your point, that's a kind of a challenging idea all on its own, isn't it? About what does it mean when God was grieved, is filled with pain over having made man, and then there's going to be a time, to Miss Baxter's point, we live in a time right now where God's looking at mankind having, in very, very short order, returned to his old ways. We won't get there, but just really quickly, there's the sacrifice. Noah was a man of the earth. He planted a vineyard. He took some of the wine he had made from the drummer, and he became intoxicated. And he lay without any clothes on in his intoxication, and Shem, Ham, and Japheth are there, and the youngest steps in and sees their father naked, and comes out and tells the brothers. And when Noah wakes up, he's very upset about this. Brad and I were focused on this not too long back, and to the best of our understanding of why Noah was really upset about this is, it's not just that, hey guys, Dad's in kind of a compromised position here. Japheth made sport of him. Ham made sport of him. Made a joke about it. Derided their father, disrespected their father. That's why the other two brothers stretched a blanket across their shoulders and walked in backwards to drop the blanket over their father, such that they would not be subject to the same thing. Noah wakes up and finds out how Ham's treated him, and cursed are you, Ham. You're going to be a slave to your brothers. Immediately following, within a year's time, Brad and I were talking about this recently, at least within one harvest time where I planted a vineyard and I was able to take grapes off of it, in a very short period of time, we've started to return to our own ways. Well, we get to make a determination about what's right, wrong, good, bad. We were just saved through the flood. And we're already chewing on that forbidden fruit again. So it doesn't take long before we get to the position that you're talking about, Joey. And so God is, with long-suffering and patience, looking upon us. Let's go to the covenant. Yes, sir.
What God is like us as parents. We have a rebellious child, okay? They go out and do many things. It upsets us.
It grieves us, yeah.
But we still love them.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we have to then take the rod to punish them.
Yeah, it's hard medicine to swallow, but we have to make that differentiation of love the sinner but hate the sin in our own families.
He had to rebellious people and drown them all. I mean, that grieved him, just like it grieves us to make our child behave.
I appreciate you saying that, because when we talked about God's grief, I personally, I can't say this as orthodoxy, but I personally take the position that at least part of what grieved God wasn't just the rebellion, but what he already knew he was going to have to do about it. That I know what's coming in your life. You don't know this, but I know what's coming in your life. And what's coming in your life is death. Everything that has life's breath in it. I want to hold Joey's comment, and to some degree this one too. I want to go to the covenant, because we're going to step maybe a little closer into what you're talking about, Joey. So the last thing that God does in his self-revelation through the life of Noah is the covenant. So I'm going to start at chapter 9, verse 8. And when I have my little circles on here, I think this is the seventh thing that God does. Then God said to Noah and his sons with him, "Now I establish my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all that came out of the ark with you, and every living creature on the earth." And at that much, Moses heard before the ark even began. Noah, I'm sorry. I've still got Moses on my head from the sermon up here and the connections that I was thinking about simultaneously up there. Noah, thank you. Noah, before the ark even began, God says, "I'm going to make a covenant with you." Didn't say what it was, just says that in this process, there'll be a new covenant. So, now he's going to start delineating it. We got a little bit, the second time God talks about the covenant, we get a little bit of a definition. Now we get the fullest definition of the covenant. I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be cut off by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant. So there's the covenant is, let's not kind of confuse them. The covenant is that never again, remember we talked about this being a unilateral covenant? This doesn't have anything to do with you. It is because of your rebellion that it's happened, but what I'm telling you now, I will never do this again. It doesn't have anything to do with you. This is a unilateral covenant. And I make this covenant with who? And what? Man, animals, Every,
Living thing.
and the, for all generations, and the earth. Yeah. Show me the elm tree that violated God's will for elm trees, or the goat that violated God's will for goats. No, it is our rebellion that brought on the curse on all of creation. And God's response is, to all of creation, a unilateral covenant that I will make. Never again will I destroy all of creation because of this. And the sign that I'll give you, now this is separate from the covenant, and this now is a sign. The sign that the covenant that I'm making between you, me, and every living creature with you, the covenant for all generations to come, I have set my rainbow in the clouds. And it will be the sign of the covenant between me and you, the animals, the trees, no, the earth, all of my creation. I want all of my creation to know that this is my commitment to my creation. I'll never do this again. This is where it really pushes me to say, if you did it once, then why? If you're never going to do it again, then why do it at all? Whenever I bring the clouds over the earth, and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind, and never again will the waters become flood to destroy all life. The rainbow. The rainbow. Now, there's no I think it's unreasonable to necessarily leap to the conclusion that the rainbow never existed before now. The rainbow is likely existed before now. It's a phenomenon of just the physics of God's creation. What does happen now is that God says, I want you, every time you see that rainbow, to remember this is the covenant I make with you. Now, is that for Noah? Noah's kids? Noah's offspring? No, for as you just said, all generations that will follow you. This is my problem. Remember, it doesn't have anything to do with all you generations that follow you. To Joey's point, is God grieved any less or more now at what he sees in us now than he was at the time that he looked upon man and said, enough? I'm going to bring the flood. I don't have a perfect answer for that, but I just can't imagine that he's not heavily grieved now. Yeah, but he does. He remembers or regards, just to suggest that God forgot the covenant and he needs to see the rainbow. No, he's placing the rainbow in the sky not for him to remember, but for you to remember. When you see that. Now today the rainbow, at least in some parts of our culture, has been co-opted and imbued with a very profane connotation. But God says, when you see it, I don't know if you saw Daniel made a posting 2 weeks or so ago after a rain. There was a huge rainbow out here, and it was a very narrow one. You could see where it started and where it stopped. It was beautiful. Here's one of the things I'd ask you. Huh? Was it double rainbow? Oh, you have it, yeah. Gail and I were traveling in North Carolina in the mountains one time, and we saw a double rainbow, I think for the very first time, in the Asheville area. And it's the first time I'd seen a double rainbow before. I didn't even know such a thing even happened before. It was quite amazing. But to that point, is that amazing to you? Rainbow's beautiful? Yeah. Do you know anybody that sees a rainbow with complete disregard? It doesn't mean, it's an irrelevancy. No, in fact, in all generations that are behind us, in all cultures, in all languages, the rainbow may not necessarily mean the same thing to everybody, but no one greets it with disregard. No one looks up at a rainbow and says, well, so what? It's a significant thing. God offers it as a sign of the covenant. And that covenant is that there is peace between us. And whether or not some particularly persuasive people who have printed it all over their shirts and walk around with pride about it, or it's just received as a beautiful thing in the atmosphere somewhere in the hillsides of China, still means the same thing. And I personally, and I'm on kind of a poetic limb here, personally I think that God selected the rainbow to be the sign of the covenant because it will be beautiful and amazing and joyous no matter where you are, who you are, what culture you came from, what language you speak, what century you lived in. You will always regard that thing as something wonderful. I just want to tell you what's wonderful about it. What's wonderful about it is that I will never do this again. And so, let me go ahead and do this, and then I'll come back to verse 16. I think I'm in good company on this. I don't think I'm out on a limb on this, but the distinction here, if I have to try to start to approach the question, if you'll never do it again, why do it at all? Is that I will no longer destroy you in your rebellion. I will redeem you out of your rebellion. It's far more than just orthodoxy that tells us that the ark of God, not Noah's ark, but the ark of God is the vehicle of salvation, and that it is theologically a Christophany, a Christ form, an allusion to the Messiah, the allusion to your salvation. But other than the assumption that the sacrifice of the animal from which skin was taken to clothe Adam and Eve, this is the first time that the idea of salvation is actually demonstrated for us. That I care enough about you to look upon you and make a value judgment that if you rebel against me, I can't just look away. I can't be apathetic. I choose not to be apathetic. I created you in my likeness and image. So I do have to do something about it. But I will stay my hand of destruction in order to offer my hand of salvation. So if I have to try to stab at the question, if you'll never do it again, why'd you do it the first time? To demonstrate to you, one, that I can, but more importantly, that I will stay my hand of destroying you in your rebellion, but extend my hand of redeeming you out of your rebellion. And that salvation that I offered you is formatively established in the idea of not Noah's ark, but my ark. My vehicle of salvation. And one day, your Redeemer will come. Which is of all the things that are planted in the deepest memories of the Hebrew people, that one truth, one day our Redeemer will come, trumps everything else. So, now, I am going to get on a limb here, and then we're going to close, because we do have to close here. I want to go to verse 16. But I want to put verse 16 in context, so I'm going to go back and read from 13. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth, and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. And never again will the waters come and flood and destroy all life. Verse 16, whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it, and I will remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth. Now, I know, I'm on a limb here. You don't have to go here if you don't want to. I tested this on Brad, and he was a little skeptical. So if you're skeptical, you're in good company with Brad here. Didn't I just say that? In verses 13 through 15, I already said what I said in verse 16. So it's a repeat. Now, it's very easy to say that, oh, that's a common tool of Scripture. We see that a lot. When something's repeated like that, it's repeated for emphasis. No, really, I'm serious. If you didn't hear me the first time, let me say it again. When I see the rainbow, I regard that as the covenant between us. I'm serious about this. I want you to be serious about this. I want you to know that there's another way that I consider. And this is the dilemma I'm on again. You can join Brad's camp on this if you want to. When I read that as a sentence, whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures on the face of the earth. If that's God's voice, God speaks of himself in third person. But what if that's Noah's voice? It doesn't say, and Noah said. But consider for a second, only because One, it's already been said, which was a pretty good reason why it would be said a second time. But consider that it's when I see, I remember what God did. And so I give, again, just this is my thoughts, consideration to the possibility that that's Noah's voice. That once God says, when I see this, I regard this, I imbued this rainbow with this meaning in your life, I want you to remember the unilateral covenant that I made to you, that I have withheld my hand of destruction and I've offered my hand of redemption. And then, if you follow my line of thought, and Noah says, yeah, okay, God, I get it. So, whenever I see the rainbow appear in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures on the earth. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say, but no, before that he said me. And then down there, if it is Noah would say, when God.
Yeah, Noah would say that. So I give really strong consideration of the possibility that this is Noah just repeating back to God what God told him. That it's conversational, that I get it. And I'm the beneficiary of it. And I understand it. And this is of high value to me. And so if there's any validity at all to that, I want to ask you, is that what you say when you see the rainbow? Is that a part of kind of your Christian life, that whenever you see a rainbow, you just don't see this beautiful phenomenon in the sky? There's somewhere in the back of my head, oh yeah, that's what, God placed that. God made that promise, that never again will he extend his hand of destruction for my rebellion. And I say, maybe not every time I see a rainbow, but more often than not, that's what I say to myself. That's what I recall. That's what to use the biblical language, that's what I remember. And so it is easy for me to, even if Noah didn't say that, that's my voice saying back. Then when I see the rainbow, yeah, I remember. I don't just greet a rainbow with disregard, whether it's beauty, but because I know the imbued meaning of it, it has so much more than just an attractive celestial or atmospheric phenomenon. This is a covenant of God. I'll never again destroy you in your rebellion, but I'll extend my hand of redemption from your rebellion. That's pretty amazing if you ask me. I get really excited about that. If I'm Noah, I get to, and let's just finish that thought. So God said, Noah, this is the sign of the covenant I'm establishing between all life on the earth. So the sons of Noah came out of the ark, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. That's the point at which we come out of the ark. We emerge from God's vehicle of salvation by repeating back to him the blessing of his covenant upon us. That we know that henceforth, this is the new world. This is why God purged, to use Joey's observations, that there was a baptism of the earth such that new life could rise out of baptism, the baptism of the earth. And we could begin again and walk again in the ways of God. Now again, we blow it. Of course we blow it. We're fallen people. But we're blowing it within the context of there is a redemption of God. And it comes by way of a unilateral covenant. But the bottom line is, you got to get on the ark. And the ark is not that wooden boat anymore. The ark is the person of Christ. So, it is a means of grace to all people, all generation, everything that has life's blood in it. This is what God offers us. But it is contingent upon receiving the vehicle of salvation that he gives us. We got to close. I mean, it's been some really great thoughts here. Any other thoughts before we go this morning? Because this is our last week on the events of Noah's life and God's self-revelation. We're going to go to Babel next week.
I just, when I see the rainbow, it's exciting because it is God's sign and he's speaking to you. And
That's a great way to say it. It's a
Yeah.
visual voice.
Yes.
Ms. Baxter,
He also put in the writer here that the rainbow should remind us that we need God's mercy and grace and make his judgment.
And his judgment is sure, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Most of us have learned it from the time we were in Sunday school, when we were children, and it's always been a big deal.
Hmm.
Just to learn it in Sunday school.
It's been a part of what has shaped and formed your life. I mean, we got to go, but I mean, if you want to chew on something for the week, chew on the idea that the idea of redemption from whatever degree of sin or transgression or offense that you've ever committed in your life, by whatever definition that you use to describe ought against another, what you might sense guilt for, that you have no means of reconciling. Chew on that for a while. And think about it didn't take me long to think about all the things that I did, and that scale starts getting imbalanced really, really fast. And to think of that I have no means of reconciling any of that. You want to chew on something, chew on that for a while, because that's a pretty daunting thought. Anything else before we wrap up this morning? Yeah, Dalton, yeah.
Nothing like that rainbow when you're standing on the beach.
Fair enough. And you see the beginning and the end on the horizon. Yeah.
And that's the most touching thing to me.
Yeah. Either you can see a meteorological phenomenon, or you can hear, to your point, hear the voice of God in a very vivid way. All right, we got to close. Larry, can you close us in prayer this morning?
Heavenly Father, we thank you for the word and the salvation of Christ. Thank you for this time of study. We might limit to our learning and our maturity in our life, that we might honor you in all things. Give you honor and glory for it all. In Christ's name. Amen.
Again, next week we're not going to move on to whatever the calendar says. We're going to be in the events of the city of Babel.